Welcome back to the Pair Program. I'm your host, Tim Winkler. A little bit of a bonus episode today. We're piloting an episode with a special guest host joining us, Rob Murtha. Rob, good having you on with us, man.
Yeah, it's great to be here. It was exciting. Great group of people to have my first kind of entry point for co-hosting. That's right.
Yeah, and if for those loyal listeners that may remember, Rob was a past guest on an episode we released around GovTech innovation. Excited to have you sit in for this one. We'll be diving into some pretty cool defense tech innovation. So your background will certainly help pick up where I can't follow through on. But for today, we're going to be tackling this topic of logistics and defense tech integration, and specifically tech integration at the edge. It's a problem area that we see a number of defense focused startups run into, especially if we're looking at regions that are super tricky to access and are pivotal, like INDOPACOM or Indo-Pacific Command. And so this is an area that our guests today have specific ties to. And I just wanted to paint the picture for our listeners that aren't familiar with that term. So INDOPACOM is the Unified Combatant Command of United States Armed Forces with a mission to protect U.S. interests across like the Asia-Pacific region. And so folks might ask themselves, why is this region so vital and of interest to the U.S.? And it's because this area of responsibility encompasses about half of the Earth's surface. It stretches from waters off the west coast of the U.S. to the western border of India and from Antarctica to the North Pole. And just a few other fun geography facts I discovered doing some research. 38 nations comprise the Asia-Pacific region, home to more than 50% of the Earth's population, 3,000 different languages, several of the world's largest militaries, and two of the world's top three largest economies with China and Japan. And speaking personally as somebody who's lived in Indonesia for a few years, I can attest that there's a significant economic disparity across the region, a number of smaller island nations that are kind of mixed throughout. And so, excited to talk about this. Let me introduce our guest for today. So joining us, we've got a couple of pros in the field. They definitely know a bit about pushing boundaries. First, we've got, Chad McCoy is the co-founder of Firestorm Labs. It's a 3D drone printing startup disrupting traditional manufacturing for unmanned aerial systems. Excited to expand on this within the episode. And alongside Chad, we have Jeff Wright. Jeff has spent a few decades in special ops, brings a strategic military perspective along with frontline insights that connect tech application with combat realities. So together, we're going to be exploring how new tech can solve old problems and some real world examples on how progressive tech startups can kind of push those boundaries literally to the edge for critical military missions. So Chad, Jeff, thanks for joining us on the pod.
Thanks.
Yeah, happy to be here, man. Thanks.
Good stuff. All right, before we get into the weeds, we're going to kick things off with a fun segment called Pair Me Up. Here's where we all kind of go around the room, spitball a few complimentary pairings. Rob, I'm going to put the mic on you. Go ahead and lead us off with your compliment pairing for the day.
So we were talking about me living in Savannah, so I had to give a little tribute to the Savannah Bananas. So Savannah Bananas and Carnival Baseball.
Dude, I was there a few months ago, was ready to go to the game, and it got canceled. Everybody had their gear on and everything.
That's wild. They're so competitive now, like to get tickets.
Yeah, it's honestly it's spread pretty pretty wide across the country.
Even my kids here in Hawaii know about them.
Crazy.
They see clips of them on the internet and stuff. My wife sees them on Instagram. So
it's on my son's bucket list too. Yeah.
It's pretty awesome how they've kind of taken this.
They're sold out like through the year, aren't they?
Yeah, you have to get them on the secondary market.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah. Harlem Globetrotters were like the original.
Yeah. That's a good connection.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Your pairing can't be zeros and ones, okay?
I'm just going to sit here and spit binary for 30 minutes, and then you got to figure it out.
You got to think of another pairing now.
I'll go the other poll.
I'll jump in real quick, and then we'll pass it over to you, Jeff. I'm going to go with toddler tantrums and some Jedi mind tricks. So folks out there who have toddlers, at this, you hit that phase, if it's 2, if it's 3, if it's 4, where they start to realize that they're a whole person and they have autonomy. And so any attempt at taking away some of that autonomy, it's usually met with a tantrum or screaming no or hitting or biting or you name it. And so this is our first kid. She's about 2.5, and we're kind of learning as we go, but we picked up on a little bit of a hack. So Alice is her name, and whenever she's kind of being her best defiant toddler self, we never ask her to do something. Instead, we kind of ask her, if she's old enough to do something, or if she's strong enough to do something, she's smart enough to do something. Never just, telling her like to go do something. And, she's desperate to tell us that she's strong enough to put her toys away, or kind enough to share her snack, or smart enough to brush her teeth. So
sounds like you read Love and Logic then.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of figured a little something out. Now that could change at any point, but for now we're kind of holding on to this little Jedi mind trick. So cool. that'll be my my little pairing for today, is these toddler tantrums and these Jedi mind tricks. You guys have kids? You guys got
yeah. I've got a 5-year-old girl. After having 2 boys before her, that had almost nothing like toddler tantrums. They were fairly, rational and easy to deal with. And Freya, for whatever reason, didn't have any kind of toddler tantrums. But now that she's 5, about to be 6, she's just realized, you know what? Compliance is optional. I don't really have to do this. And in the negotiation of life, the BATNA is whatever I say it is. And no, I'm just not going to do that. And so what I'm finding with her is that a complete non sequitur can take her from whatever, direction she's going. All I have to do is pretend like it's not even happening, and just like change the scene to something emotionally and logically unconnected with what was upsetting her. And she just leaves. Oh, the past is in the past, like all of 10 seconds ago, and then goes in the new direction.
Mm. Yeah. The negotiations get next level with parenting. It's pretty wild to see, the level you get on with kids. And
if we can stay completely separated from it and just look at it as a developmental psychology experiment, it'd be fascinating. But the problem is that it's the most frustrating thing in the world, because it's your kid, your genes, your house, your 7 o'clock at night when you're tired, and you got to take yourself out of the equation to be the psychologist and the parent. And it's right. I don't think I got an A on that test. It's hard.
Yeah, until they can start paying rent, you're gonna listen to the rules of the house. Mm-hmm. Cool. All right, let's pass over to Jeff. How about yourself? Quick intro and your pairing.
Yeah. So Jeff Wright. As of a couple of weeks ago, I was an active duty special operator at Special Operations Command Pacific. I'm now transitioning out. I've got my own startup that I'm getting into the space with, and my pairing we're going to talk about is trail runs with dogs. So I love running. I suck at it. I have to work very hard to be mediocre, but it's just something that I enjoy a lot. But when I add my dogs to it, especially through the woods, it just evokes something ancient. And we get into this rhythm where I kind of lose track of time, and it feels whole. It feels natural. And it's really nothing else that I'd rather be doing is the combination of those 2 things.
I dig that. What kind of dogs you have?
Right now, I've got a 3-year-old Labrador, and she's a great runner after the first mile when she realizes that not everything has to be sniffed. And then she falls into a groove, and we're good after that. But throughout most of my 20s and 30s, getting ready to go to selections and in between deployments and whatnot, I had a German Shepherd, Malamute mix, and an Australian Shepherd. I'd take them out to the woods, whatever training areas it would be. They would never need leashes, and they'd just run right with me the entire time until they'd smell something, look up at me and like, hey, boss, can we go check that out? Yeah, go scout. And they'd be gone for 10, 20 minutes. And I would love at some point to be able to know what adventures they went on. But they would just be running around in the woods, living their best life. And they'd check back in, filthy, probably having gotten in a scrap with whatever animal it was. And it's just kind of the way that life should be, full speed.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Good things.
Jeff, you're like low-key Maximus from Gladiator. Remember the open like riding with the dog? It's like,
I'm working on the beard now. This iteration of the beard is a little bit more salt than pepper. I mean, Chad, I don't know, man. Like, I thought I was gonna have a little bit longer with salt and pepper, but there's not a lot of pepper left these days.
Mine was brown a couple years ago. Now it's almost fully white. So
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Yep, right there.
I dig that. I got a Swiss Mountain Dog, and nothing better than getting out on a trail with a dog, man. They just have that, especially a lab, man. That's a perfect kind of, and obviously the German Shepherd and the Aussie. Cool. All right. Well, thanks for joining us, Chad. How about yourself? Quick intro and your pairing.
Yeah. So, I also, Jeff and I would have been teammates in a former life. I was a little bit, I don't know, we're separated by some geography and some time. I retired in 21. I did, 23 years in SOF as a pararescueman. I actually was stationed out there in Jeff's AOR. I was in Okinawa for a while and did some other, tours back through the SOCPAC staff in a different life. I find myself on the other fence, the other side of the fence of DoD and in industry, obviously, but that's a formative, kind of piece of my life, and allows me to, it doesn't give me authority to speak on the things I talk about, but it allows me to be, insightful and creative with product, and it's given us a competitive advantage as a business. I know that for a fact. I know that we can outpace other businesses because of the institutional knowledge we have from inside the fence and outside the fence. And so I feel strongly about that. That's me in a nutshell. You can look at my background online, but, my pairing is midlife crisis and Porsche. And when you go to, big cities, you get to see that in action. You go to Tampa, and that's something my son and I love to see. Is he's 15. We love watching supercars, drive by, and a lot of them in Hawaii, but any big city, man. I love seeing the guy who's, he's got the chest hair popping, gold chain, just living his best life. I'm not quite there yet, but I do have an old 80s Porsche in the garage, and that's my midlife crisis car. So when it starts, I'm very happy.
Sweet.
Sounds like all you're missing is the chain and the chest hair, bro. We can.
Yeah, I'm growing the chest hair out. That's coming out.
I know what headshot we're gonna get for your I know what headshot we're going with for your for your cover of the pod is like a top down, shades on, little chain. That sounds so good, man. That's great.
The ultimate midlife crisis car is the Corvette, man. That's like the the C8. It's affordable, it's accessible, but
That's awesome. Good round. I think everybody had a nice diversity, and we didn't divert into traditional like food or drink pairings. That's usually like the cave into that as the comfort pairing. But enjoyed this round. Enjoyed getting to know everybody a little bit more, and let's dive into the core of the episode. So as I mentioned, we're going to be talking a little bit about logistical challenges for these tech startups supporting defense customers. And for this episode, we're going to hone in on future conflict areas like INDOPACOM. Along the discussion, we'll talk more in depth around tech integration at the edge. And if we have the time, I want to bleed into some scaling strategies that revolve around open architectures for long-term defense tech resilience. So let's jump in. I want to start with you, Jeff, in defining the problem, because something that stood out to me during our discovery kind of banter was that you felt it was important to discuss the narrative of war in the Pacific region and its connection to the challenges that we faced during World War II. So maybe you can start with expanding on that, and then Chad, we'll get to your perspective on Firestorm's approach to these challenges.
Yeah, totally, dude. This is 100% where you need to start, and keeping the audience in mind that the what's in it for me from the defense tech startup is first and foremost, how do you make money? And so I think this is a function of two things. You got to focus on what actually works in the real world, what wins wars. Because what's the point of making money if the nation loses and our way of life and our economy collapses and whatnot? So that's the sine qua non. That's the bottom line thing that we can't not do is win. Unfortunately, that's not always connected with what makes money. And the reason why is the gap between what I call the monomyth and the real world. To roll the tape back a little bit, when you were introducing INDOPACOM, I was thinking, man, I'd love to explain for a second the nature of what a GCC is, the Geographic Combatant Command. It's underappreciated until you come out to one of these staffs, the degree of separation between the services whose responsibility is to organize, train, and equip, buy stuff, create the formation, et cetera, and the problem-solving staff out here. What we have is a drop down menu, like a literal, like you click a button and there's a bunch of names of units and types of equipment that you can request from the services to come out here and solve problems for you. And the services job is to take their best guess at which one of these things would be useful to a guy like me out here in INDOPACOM to solve problems with and to force generate those things. Us out here in INDOPACOM, we don't have money. We don't have a checkbook. We don't have the ability to create a program of record, to buy hardware, to say, I want the formation to look like this instead of that. We have mechanisms to inform that process, but all we can do is make requests. We can create what's a capital R requirement that tells the services, hey, I need you to build this. We can inform the mission generation in the special operations side, especially to say, here's the mission guidance letter. As you're creating a SEAL platoon for INDOPACOM, here's what they need to be able to do. But man, these are not direct levers that we have. So as the defense tech folks are thinking, how do I make money in the Indo-Pacific? You got to realize that when you talk to the guys who are solving problems like me, like my job out here has been for the past couple of years to look at robotics and autonomy and to figure out how those things can be applied against INDOPACOM challenges. I don't have a checkbook. You can come to me and I can give you ideas, but then you have to then build that and then sell it to the people who have the checkbook at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, at Naval Yard in the Potomac, stuff like that. That's where the people with the dollars are. And in fact, this hackathon that we're trying to put together in Hawaii, the first day of it, we're trying to have the program managers, people who understand the acquisitions process, come out and give like a one-day workshop for all these awesome tech companies that have the right tech and the right ideas, but don't know how to translate those into actual dollars. So there's kind of a quick overview. I want to turn the microphone back over to Chad real quick and then get into the monomyth. Like, what's the difference between when people say in a war in Pacific, what that means. But first, Chad, thoughts on the difference between acquisitions programs and making money as a startup.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this ad nauseum. I mean, this is a hard problem, especially when you have to connect dots for the government. And I wasn't used to this. And one, if you don't know the network, it's a lost cause. You have to have an inside champion. If you don't, you're dead in the water. And even if when you go to a conference or an expo and you hear the CGs get up on stage and tell everybody what they want, when you bring them what they want, they're still confused on how to get it or maintain it or take ownership of it. And so it's a multi-level problem. And I think that there's a lot of innovation organizations that say they can help with this and they're going to be the gatekeeper or the concierge. But the truth is that you just got to muscle your way through it. And there's a 50-50 chance you're going to be successful. This is a really hard defense tech is damn hard.
Yeah, we talk a lot about that on the pod because, dual use gets thrown around a lot. It's a real buzzy, really, appealing from a founder's perspective. But the fact of the matter is it can oftentimes be a trap. We got a future guest coming on who wrote a blog about this. And, if you're not standing up from the early stages with the intent and understanding of what goes on into the acquisition process, you're going to be spending a lot of time, a lot of burn. And, if that's your livelihood, from a startup founder, I mean, good luck to you because it's not easy to keep that cash, flow rolling if you're a product company.
Let me say something on the dual use piece though too, because Jeff's getting ready to go into the cycle of raising money for his business, right? And when we first raising, it's like, hey, are you guys dual use? And I'd want to vomit in my mouth when I heard it because I'm like, hey, dumbass, everything is dual use unless it's a JASM, right? A JASM's not dual use. But if it's a UAS, use your creativity, man. Like, does it need to be dual use? And if we're talking defense, why do we care if it's dual use? And so, I take issue with that whole, kind of mindset, and it's extremely frustrating. And I think that almost it should be a selection criteria for you, Jeff, as you vet your investors. I mean, dual use is such a hot button thing to say.
I get why that would be of interest to investors because the defense market is fickle, especially if you don't understand the nuances of how dollars actually flow. In our sidebar before we started recording, we were talking about the people we know who are actually writing the laws and cutting the checks. That type of insider knowledge is really required if you're going to thrive in this space. I've seen really good technology not match up with money. And I've seen the opposite happen too, where just crap ideas with not, baked anything get the dollars because they understood how it worked. The key thing that I'd ask kind of listeners to take into account if they're not familiar with how the acquisitions process works is that this is not the free market. This is not the way where a person who has an idea has a credit card that they can swipe and buy a thing that they need. We have this convoluted, like we've almost modeled it after our adversaries in the non-free world, where we've put layers of bureaucrats and processes between the problem owner, again, me out here in INDOPACOM, designing the operations against adversaries, and all the hoops I have to jump through to get the dollars and the physical things to go do it. You got to understand that, or you're not going to succeed in the defense market. I think a lot of the VCs have been burned by this because they say, oh, this is a great idea. The warfighter clearly needs it. Admiral so-and-so said so when he was on stage. And they're like, okay, well, does Admiral so-and-so have a checkbook? Is he a PEO? No, what you really need is the major, the lieutenant commander who's sitting there in a windowless cubicle who actually writes the checkbook and runs the program.
Yeah.
And until you have someone on your team who understands that stuff, you're dead in the water. I'm embarrassed a little bit that I've gotten so deep into that side of it because I've realized this is, in the military, what we call the Schwerpunkt. This is the hard part of the battle, is getting the dollars. If we want to succeed as defense companies, you have to understand how a bill becomes a law. That old cartoon from the 80s, the story of how a appropriated dollar becomes a thing in the hands of the warfighter. And you need to be able to trace it from whose hands are on the keyboard appropriating what dollar for what program, what color of money, what resource sponsor, what acquisitions office, what service, what force generation element, how is that requested through the global force management system to actually get out the thing. It's a convoluted thing, and it probably all needs to be burned to the ground and rebuilt in a smarter way. And yet this is the world that we live in. And if you're going to actually make real dollars and make a real impact, you got to master it or nothing else matters.
Mm-hmm. Rob, one last thing on the dual use from you, and then we'll get back to that the mono myth.
Yeah, so what I was just going to cover is that people make it an imperative rather than a thesis. It's a good thesis because there's like areas of various like international markets where it has made people more successful. Like the fact that China has manufactured cell phones for 20 years. They have like ridiculous leg up on sensors and camera manufacturing and all of that stuff that ends up transferring from their commercial sector to their defense sector. And they've established a wedge, right? And then you're totally right. Like there's a lot of times where there are things that are dual use and they're more commercially positioned, and there's just too much friction for like them to be adopted for like this very specific sensitive defense use case. But then again, like there's a ton of risk in the Defense Department where you're kind of beholden to these stakeholders that flip their seats every 3 years. So you get to be like plugged into a program office, a new colonel comes through and he wants to recreate the wheel with new partners and new touch points. I mean, it's all chaos.
That's a certainty.
Yeah, it's all chaos, and it's like you could only control so much, just like any type of startup situation. That's the beauty of like the private market. And I think the more people bet on like human nature and like personify their stakeholders, personify their investors, really model their environments, and then model the warfighting domain and how flexible and chaotic that is. I think that's a really good way to reduce risk when you're launching a startup. Yeah. From what I've seen.
That's a good point, Rob. I feel like we could riff a whole episode around this topic alone, but just getting back to the main point here with operating in the Indo-Pacific area. So talk to me a little bit about that monomyth concept you're talking through.
Yeah,
Jeff.
So we'll start with a little bit of neurology. Is that neural grooving and neural weights. When you think a certain pattern of thoughts, it becomes physically encoded in your brains. Like those neurons are more likely to fire in the synaptic patterns that resulted in that thought. We have so many decades of thinking about World War II that is our monomyth. We loved that war. It makes so much sense for us. It's linear. It's like this true good and evil story. It starts in one physical geographic place and it ends in another. It's like American football as opposed to soccer. Like we love football because you don't go backward. What are you talking about? No, you go forward the entire time. And then like, if you go forward, you stop. And that's not the way that the world works normally, but that's how World War II worked. So we've spent 6 decades or more now LARPing as our grandparents, getting ready for World War III. Hell, we had a name for a war before it even happened. And remember that World War II came after the World War. My favorite monument in DC is the monument to what we now call World War I. but you read the inscriptions on that kind of abandoned monument, and it says the Great War, the war to end all wars. And then we were surprised when it happened again, worse. And so after that war, we said, we got to be ready for the next one. And we thought of it in terms of a sequel, as if there's going to be an iteration that comes next where we have to do the same thing again. Man, this thought process is the beating heart of the dysfunction out here, is that we are thinking we have to do the same war the same way, where we start behind our 20 and our part of the territory in our football field, and we get our forces ready and we tip fid, which is, getting all the forces flowing together. And then we start pushing west. And so when we talk about logistics in the Indo-Pacific, that's what everybody's thinking. They're automatically loading a set of assumptions that aren't necessarily real. And let's check with Ukraine real quick to see how that set of assumptions worked for the war that happened. Man, we've been preparing since the late 1940s for the Red Army from Russia to sweep west and invade a liberal democracy, and then we're going to stop it. It happened. Man, we're not waiting anymore. It happened. Russia put everything they had, and they got bogged down in Ukraine. Like, there's no threat in Poland and France or Germany. Like, Russia is not the second strongest in the world, but the second strongest in Ukraine. How did the U.S. military perform? All those decades of investment, we assumed that war in Europe was going to look like X. None of that was true. What actually happened was that instead of uniformed U.S. service members fighting against thermonuclear armed enemies, uniformed service members, which was our assumption for a long time, as it turns out, that's not a thing. Proxy wars are the thing, and that we don't fight directly other nations where mutually assured destruction is part of the calculus, and we want to nip around the edges. The problem is that this monomyth, and back to the Pacific here, the monomyth is so deep that we don't want to take focus away from preparing for the big one from World War III. Don't worry about Vietnam. Don't worry about the little terror wars in the Philippines. Don't worry about a small thing, an invasion of Taiwan, if we're not involved. Like, it's our carriers, our armored combat divisions, our MEFs, our submarines, our bombers. And if it's not that, kind of like not our job. That's the monomyth. So as we're talking about logistics, I would challenge the assumption that war in the Pacific involves United States military members. That's the big thing.
Yeah, I think that's a great take, and I mean, I'd have to agree with the how you're comparing this to like the football analogy. It makes a lot of sense to me, just because Americans are obsessed with it. But I want to bring it back to the logistical piece, because when we talk about defense tech and getting through some of those challenges to get it into the hands of the end users, it's not an easy task, Chad. I mean, you're going to be able to speak to this firsthand. Talk to me about from a logistics perspective what you at Firestorm are doing to try your best to troubleshoot these areas.
Yeah, well, I'll give you a little context of what we have as a business and tell you how we think it fits within the operational landscape. So, first of all, when we got together as a founding team, the initial design that we were building was 3D printed. And, being 3D printed isn't the most effective to scale, like injection molding is way faster and cheaper. But when a product is constantly evolving, and we call it future-proofed, 3D printing is really effective at doing that. And there's a lot of organizations within the military now, like the Army's Transformation and Contact, efforts of, hey, they want to be able to change things in design on the fly. The other piece is like digital engineering, right? And so when we talk about digital design, or being able to modify things in that space, and then pushing files forward to design, that's really important too for the military. Well, at least they're learning that. And small pockets of military already knew that, especially in the labs. But so we had a platform that was 3D printed. And so my brain went to logistics, right? Because I lived in, secluded places that didn't have big support sites like MSSs overseas. And you had to be creative about how you got logistics in. And sometimes there was one aircraft that was going to land at a remote spot, it was going to dump a bunch of stuff off of, and you had to live, for however long you had. And so logistics is near and dear to most guys that have actually been in combat's hard. And so my first question to Ian was, our CTO, I said, man, can we containerize this manufacturing capability? Like, is it just a printer? What's the manufacturing line look like? And we started speccing it out. And what we realized is that with a very small footprint, we can create a manufacturing workflow. And so in that, we had a containerized system we call XCELL. And XCELL blew people's minds in the beginning because people couldn't grasp it. They're used to the bias of what 3D printing was in the past, right? It was building desk tchotchkes and ornaments or plaques. And it was never supposed to be this resilient aircraft you could land with hundreds of hours. And so we fought this stigma. I mean, we still fight the stigma. It's not, we haven't won it yet. But it started at SOCOM, and you'd have folks at SOCOM that just could not wrap their brains around it. And it took us a long time to find the right champions across the DoD. And I will be honest with you that it really hasn't been soft as an early adopter. It's been the services. And the services are starting to get it. And because the services are realizing that contested logistics is going to be the hardest problem, and there's no one size fits all solution. And I'm not implying that we can solve all those problems, but we have this drone factory that just happens to be able to print everything, and drones and everything else, right? And so, and I'll just give you an example. The MQ-9 community down at Cannon Air Force Base, the AFSOC MQ-9s, are starting to see the value in something like this to prevent parts that break. And do we need to have specialty skills to use these systems? Well, not if we have a menu of options of things that are already catted out and put in the system. It's just hit play and go, right? I'm oversimplifying the process, but what we can do for the big Navy, so Greyhound Navy, really supporting those ships, and not supporting the ships with drones, supporting with replacement parts, is really key to the next fight. And the reason it's pertinent to Jeff's AOR is that it's this tyranny of distance that we used to describe in AFRICOM. PACOM's 10 times worse because we don't have ground forces that can go from point A to point B. And the assumption is that supply chains are going to be cut off. And so if you have XCELL containerized protection on island and the lights go out, well, I guess we're still producing drones at the edge, right? And so that should be damn scary to our enemies that they can't stop us. And so that's what the thesis was, and that's what we've built out, and that's what we're doing currently.
Yeah, one of these containers already deployed. I think I saw one on socials, on a trailer hitch, just going down the highway.
Yeah, I teased that because I was going to Capitol Hill that day, so we put it out there. It's out there. It's printing a drone right now, and so the goal is that in 48 hours you have a functional drone that can go fly. And we're not talking about quadcopters. We're talking about Group 2 systems that are traveling 150 miles and striking targets with precision. And so this is very different than producing quadcopters. This is it's not a strategic effect until you use it that way. But I think it takes a step out of the tactical and goes into the operational.
And the value of having things already in place can't be overstated. The idea of the adversary giving us time to get all of our logistics ready, oh guys, don't start, we're not ready, time out, you can't snap the ball early. That's not a thing. The idea of us having the ability to flow things westward is probably not a thing until very late in a traditional conflict as normally conceptualized. Anything that's already in play inside the first island chain, even the second island chain, that is something that we can rely on. You can't count on things being tip fitted, i.e. flowed from the continental United States and anything like a strategically relevant timeline. If it's already there, it can be used. One mutation of this further is that we always conceptualize this as it's a uniformed American service member doing it. What if we're pulled out? What if the decision is made the same that was made in Ukraine, where whistles blown, everybody out of the pool, and we're watching this thing happen from the Centurion Lounge at whatever international airport that it's going down? The tools that we got in, the relationships we built with the partners, and our ability to develop insurgent resistant forces if an area should fall, or to bolster the defense capability of whatever nation we're supporting, Taiwan, Philippines, etc. That is only possible if you've got the stuff in place. XCELL, the reason I'm such a fan of this concept is that it gives you the ability to not only make stuff, but make stuff that is proven. And it's not a STL file that you're downloading and then hoping somebody can figure out how to integrate all the things. Big misconception I hear about building drones is, I'm going to 3D print a drone. Bro, you can 3D print an airframe, and then all the other things that go into it is extensive. It is really hard to do. What Ian and his team at Firestorm have done is to design airframes that are designed for this additive manufacturing process and to create XCELLs that not only 3D print it, but they're moving the pieces around. So minimal human involvement. So you've got the dream for all of us that grew up playing Command and Conquer and Red Alert and all that stuff, where instead of having the factory on your corner of the map, the ultimate move is you put the factory as close to the adversary as possible. So you're pumping stuff out right underneath his nose. That's what these guys have figured out.
Mm.
Yeah, and the only thing I'd add is that, what I've surmised this as when I was in the Pentagon on Wednesday is that, I used the visual for the commander I was talking to, and I said, we're not a company, we're a ConOp. And it resonated with him because he realized that we are a ConOp. We're taking this completely operational approach to manufacturing and production. And the other thing is these drones don't have to be a provocation. Our drones are multi-mission. And so they can start as an ISR asset. They can convert to an EW decoy or offensive EW source. And then you can basically repurpose that as a one-way attack. And so what the DoD has never had is they've never had control of the product. And so my goal as a former operator is to give them the keys to the castle and say, I don't want to dictate your tactics, guys. Here's the tool. You create your tactics and the tool supports you. And the price point's cheaper than everything else. And so when you dump it in the drink, you're not worried that you're going to lose your job over it. And then the other piece is we're laying on autonomy too, right? And this is a policy issue. This isn't something we're going to solve in this podcast, but I believe strongly that in the next 3 to 5 years, policy will change, and these systems will be fully autonomous, and they'll be making hopefully good decisions with inputs from humans. But we have to kind of release them and into the wild, and that will be an inflection point for combat. And to Jeff's point about U.S. troops, boots on the ground. I think yes, but I think the flood's going to get a little bit further back. And I think that's a good thing for preservation of risk to mission, risk to force. And I think that hopefully we'll lose less U.S. lives in conflict.
So one other thing to note about the XCELL's ability to make things under the enemy's nose. If you're familiar with how Chinese military thinking goes, they are a very science-based, modeling and simulation-based culture. They don't embrace, the VUCA mentality that we do, where uncertainty, fog of war, friction. They try to make everything as known as possible. If they can't tell their bosses how many drones are in a certain location, what troop strengths are, they're much less inclined to take action because the answer is, I don't know. Create a network of XCELL and XCELL-like things where how many drones are there today? You don't know. Hell, we don't know because we don't know what our guys at the platoon and the company level are doing necessarily. They could have printed out an extra 100. They could have not. And that uncertainty to change a constant into a variable, I can't tell you how much that messes with the adversary's strategic calculation. That induces friction and fog that is incompatible with the certainty the PLA kind of military thinking requires to take action. So in terms of deterrent value, X number of drones is less valuable. 1,000 drones is less valuable than X number of drones if it's a defined thing. And that's what putting the factory right in the enemy's nose gets you.
And Jeff, that the DoD has a fascination with this number 1,000. It's almost like when you retire from the military, you have to make 6 figures, right? It's this, arbitrary number. But 1,000 drones is like the brass ring. And so, what I've been doing in DC all week is evangelizing for the fact that with 7 XCELLs, we can get to 1,000 drones in 6 months, and that just scales from there. And so that's blowing people's minds because, traditionally all the money they've invested in the past few years has got you hundreds of drones, but hundreds of drones doesn't compete. And candidly, 1,000 drones doesn't even tip the scale in our favor. And so China just bought a million drones, right? And so even if we get to 10,000, we're still short. And so somebody asked me this morning, they said, are you worried about the other competitors in the space that are much bigger and better funded than you? And I said, no, because I think there's plenty of space for all of us to coexist. And I think that we can be complementary in the way we produce drones to produce their parts. And then eventually we're going to be printing their drones for them. And so, I look at it as kind of being, the cool kid. We got the van. We can take everybody to the party. And we're doing the same thing with integrations, right? We don't need to own, every portion of this. We really look at Tempest, our group too, as being, a smartphone. And these are applications you can add on to it.
Right. And that number 1,000, I think that it rhymes with replicator in a lot of reasons. So let's bring that up. And I'm going to try not to have this become a therapy session for me. That the number I think is public now, and the fact that Switchblade 600 was one of the things picked. The fact that weapon was picked as a drone is important to note. That a drone is not a drone is not a drone. A thing that requires a single human to pilot it and a patent communications link between the operator and the weapon is not the same as a one-way autonomous attack drone that can do some sort of logic at the edge. Hold on, get up, thanks. My 14-year-old is in the habit of jumping on my video calls with me, and I need to break that habit.
Well, he's wicked smart, though. He'd probably be a value add to this conversation.
You know, if I had the context, he would be a good add to it.
Yeah.
You're not wrong. But for the purposes of listeners, when we say a drone, we need to really tease out what that means, and to make sure that we have what Ben Coleman is calling weapon warfare fit. Product market fit is how you get something bought. Weapon warfare fit is how you make something that is actually useful in combat. Do not assume that because it is a drone that it is useful. Anybody who's familiar with what is happening with U.S. made stuff in Ukraine knows we got a little bit of a stain on our reputation. American made is a byword for overpriced and non-performant in Ukraine in most contexts. Not something we talk about enough, is that we are saying that just because it's a drone and it passed our standards, that it's useful. Man, I just got out of a planning meeting. I don't want to go into details here at the unclass level, but we were talking about an exercise, and I was insisting that we incorporate electronic warfare into that. Say, hey, look, all our adversaries have X, Y, and Z. We need to be able to survive in these environments. And what I was told by a retired 06 who's in charge of the exercise is that, well, if we put electronic warfare into this, then all of our stuff will fail. And if it fails, we don't learn anything. And so we need to make sure that we learn something from this exercise. I'm like,
love it.
Dude, if your stuff fails, that's a lesson to be learned. And yet that's the standard that we're testing to.
Yeah.
Program managers don't benefit if you expose their gear to things that make it fail. But we need to change our culture such that the first time it's tested isn't in combat.
Well, let me add to the culture change thing. You know, when we talk about the lessons learned from Ukraine, there's a lot to learn, but it's not apples to apples when you talk about theaters. Mm-hmm. And what I see in the DoD is that they're saying, well, let's just do what they did and we'll do it at the US scale and then we'll win the next war. And it's almost like you just want to punch yourself in the face. It's not apples to apples, right? And if we were to take one Tempest and fly it towards a bunch of GOs that are watching an exercise, let's say, you know, in Michigan, what are they going to do about it? There's no countermeasures they can do to stop that thing. And if it came down and had a terminal, you know, had an attack angle at them, they're going to shit their pants, because when that thing pulls off, they're going to realize they're completely vulnerable and they don't have a countermeasure for it. And so this is the new reality of combat. I didn't face it during my time in service. We had supremacy, and that paradigm has shifted significantly.
Completely. When I went to Air Command and Staff College, one of the rah-rah things at the start of it is that, you know, the instructor's on the stage and says, no Americans have been injured by air attacks since 1958 or whenever it was. That's not true anymore. When I was in that auditorium, the guy sitting next to me was a Ranger Company commander who'd just gotten back from Syria. And he's like, no, BS. I lost 2 mortarmen from ISIS dropping grenades. And as of today, the U.S. is barely able to do what ISIS was doing almost a decade ago. We are miles behind. We have lost air superiority. That's what my startup is trying to do. I don't want to take attention away from Chad and yours, but in sum, we're building fighter drones to win back air superiority at low altitudes. Our manned air-breathing fighters are too fast, too exquisite, and too few to be able to do it. What we need is drones that can sense, dogfight, and shoot down other drones, and that's precisely what Splash One is building.
That's sick. Yeah, I'm excited to hear more about that when you guys come out of stealth, and probably have you back on for a future episode, Jeff.
I think he just did, didn't he?
I guess it is. Yeah,
we found the patents yesterday, so I'm
going to bleep it out.
Start talking about it.
Well, we've got a month before this comes out, but we'll make sure you're good with that.
Can I ask a question really quick about like the supply chain stuff? I think it's like a detail that a lot of people overlook. Like, I'm not a 3D printing person, totally in the software domain, but I do a lot of problem solving with warfighters, like in the trenches. And I think something that people overlook about the 3D printing piece is the resiliency of like maintaining the materials, right? like I look at it like just zooming out, it's like straight up Minecraft. You get, I assume there's storage costs, like from like a degrading materials perspective. If you have like totally production ready subcomponents, like they're going to degrade a lot faster than some like, block of goop that you could turn into something that's like really effective, right? And probably mischaracterizing it. But I mean, the cost savings is probably ridiculous. Your ability to store it in a diverse array of environments is really cool, and vary that stuff. I mean, it's insane. Like the ROI is nuts. And like anything, I think the true value is in the details, and that kind of all rolls into the product, you both are building. So super excited.
Rob, you nailed it, man. And so here's the disparity that I'll just lay out for you guys without saying anybody's name. It takes 5 to 6 weeks for them to build one bird. Okay. That's why they're so far behind. And I just told you how long it takes us to build one. That's where we start. And then the price point, we're a third of their cost. And so, how do we do that? Are we just more creative than them? Like, no, man, they're big businesses. They know how to make money. Their margins are really good. They're the ones that drive the cool sport car, not the air cooled. But right now as a business, we're trying to reduce, our time from print to flying. And we're doing that through, just like you said, there are subcomponents that are semi-assembled, right? We're talking kitting the systems out. I don't want the soldier doing, putting servos into a wing. I want those things already pre-built. But when you talk about the economy of scale to ship those things stacked this way, we're talking shipping thousands of drones, right? And so this is what people are having a hard time wrapping their heads around. And then to your point about materials, we're a non-exquisite material. Jeff knows what it is. And we did that intentionally so that we can make sure that we don't have any supply chain limitations. And if we're talking carbon fiber, man, carbon fiber is super strong, as you guys know. It's also super laborious, right, to build out. And the strength to weight ratio is excellent, man. And so there's a time and place for that. And maybe aircraft are half that and half this. And so when we start looking at hybrids, this is where it's going to get really fun. And creative guys like Jeff, are going to make a lot of money in the future because they see it that way. And so, I'm excited to be part of the solution.
Yeah.
Jeff's holding back a smile.
The fact that all of this is commercially off the shelf, and let's bring this conversation back to logistics. When you talk about resupply, the monomyth answer is that resupply comes from Rosie the Riveter in Long Beach, and it gets on a ship and it goes west. Yeah. When I've been asked about the ConOps where I'm planning to employ Firestorm stuff in the Indo-Pacific, I go to Google Maps and I show the number of kilometers between, hey, if I'm defending this hill, I'm attacking this enemy force at this location. Here's Bob's Hobby Shop off of this street where they sell all the parts that I'm talking about. The factory that makes the board and the chip is just down the road, man. Like I'm not making stuff in Detroit and then having to ship it 14 time zones across the world. I'm making stuff inside the area where we're using it out of components that are sourced from raw materials inside this area. Yes, we have a globally connected economy, but Southeast Asia, where we're talking about for all these things, is where a lot of this happens to begin with. We're talking about semiconductors. We're talking about microelectronics. I mean, just looking around my workshop right now, like I'll pull my project that I was working on last night off the shelf here. Like every one of these components was made in Southeast Asia. The preponderance of it is made in Taiwan, Thailand, and a couple things in mainland China that I'm trying to get out of my supply system. That's where all the stuff comes from to begin with. Like there is no shortage of that. Yeah. The challenge when we talk about logistics, I think it comes down to a supply chain issue. How do we make sure that it's the free world that makes this stuff and has it available? In America is great. Friendshored in Thailand, friendshored in Vietnam, in Taiwan, maybe even better, because then as the special operator, I have less of a logistical concern about getting my hands on it than if it had to come from.
Yeah, Jeff, the other piece is like co-production, right? So, are you willing to do co-production through, a highly skilled technical workforce like you have in a lot of these countries? We don't have a lock on this engineering talent. We have some excellent engineers, obviously, but we can do this overseas. And the other piece is when we talk logistics, or we talk about sovereignty in logistics. The reason that the European nations like what we're doing is because they want to slap their flag on the back of the bird, and we're all about it. Yeah, I mean, we don't need to have a Firestorm US logo on it. You want to make it in Norway? Let's do it. And when you give them the keys to the castle and you say that, hey, you're not going to be susceptible to a change in administration or policy, they really like that. I would really like that if it was a small country. I'm like, hey, man, I don't want to have to be at the whims of your political parties.
Yep.
And so, we're looking at what does that look like? How do we maintain quality control through the process? Because it's obviously our name at the end of the day. If they all fall out of the sky because there was an issue in production, that's an issue. But we're going to figure it out, and we're going to test the waters with some key partners, and we're going to get hopefully some wins for US on this.
Nice.
And that gets to a little bit about what jobs are entailed in making an aircraft. When we say building a drone, everybody thinks of the guy with the soldering iron in his hand actually assembling the thing. That's the very end of it. The designing, the computer-aided design part of it, the aeronautical engineering, all of the testing, all the reps and sets that make it so you have a formula that a relatively low-skilled dude right next to the flot can be pumping out these things. All those jobs can and should and must be in American hands. So we have the intellectual property, we have control over anything that's sensitive, and we can export it where and when we want. The actual making of the thing, that can be friend short, especially the components where, turning a couple $1 worth of plastic into a servo, maybe that's not a thing that is critical for our economy. But doing the design to take an idea, a defense concept, put that into metal, plastic, and silicon, that is an American thing. That's what we need to be protecting and making sure it stays in our country.
And we will be 3D printing munitions in the future. I mean, it's possible. At scale, not yet. But the thing is, you can 3D print your frag packs, and then you can pack these munitions in the field. And that's what we've been talking about in Ukraine, right? It's like, how do we get more artillery shells to Ukraine? But if we could say, hey, I can print you now tailorable fragmentation based on design, right? If Jeff comes to me and says, Chad, I need to punch a hole through this kind of steel. Gotcha. Let's put it in the gonculator, and we pump out a new design, and then we print it on the edge. We go test it in the field where we're already at. And then we put this thing live. That's going to be, again, this is how combat's changing. And it's not hyperbole for me to say, and Jeff, I think you would agree with this, is that this company can change warfare. And that's why I'm excited to come to work every day, right? It's like, I get to be a part of this, something that's really special. I'm doing more now in industry than I did in uniform. And I think I had a pretty good, career in uniform. But this is way harder, and it's more impactful on a strategic sense.
Yeah, it's awesome. I've never seen anything like it, Chad. I was super excited to get you, interested in talking about this, because I think, this is a use case that, folks can kind of wrap their head around, physically see some of the cool shit that you're building and having it out in production in the wild. And then Jeff, your perspective, I really loved how you, when you were talking about defining, integration at the edge, how you broke that into it's the physical proximity, but also the degrees of separation from makers to operators, because it's not just
and that can all happen in parallel, man. Like my fever dream is you have an edge user defining what's hot that week. Tech dev cycles in Ukraine are not measured in months, much less palm cycles. It's literal week to week stuff. The Firestorm approach, where we don't have one model, we have the ability to, and I say we as if I'm part of your company. I mean, like, you guys
we feel that
way. You have the ability to rapidly change stuff in response to what's happening on the front line. We need change X. The American engineer hears that and says, I need to change the CAD file from A to B, makes those changes, and can email it, can send it back forward. Chad, you want to tell the story real quick about how y'all did that for the demonstration in Rome?
Yeah, guys. So usually integrations take 2 to 3 weeks and millions of dollars, right? Rob, you want to change, hardware, it's super expensive when you're in the military. Jeff knows this. I know this. And what we showed with AFRL RI, the information directorate, which I would say, and I'll say this on record, I think is one of the more forward-leaning aspects of the lab, the things that they're doing to support Jeff's mission. I'm really proud of what they're doing. They had a dissimilar kind of EW effect that they needed to add it to our fuselage. It didn't fit. And so we basically changed the entire design of our aircraft in less than 1 day, had the part printed, sent to Rome, New York, attached the aircraft and flew it. And that blew their minds because, one, it didn't cost them anything, pennies on the dollar. But two, that rapid cycle is what they should expect in the test community. And so that's why I think that XCELLs in the wild are great. I think XCELLs within the test environment are excellent as well. I look at Nellis as an opportunity to have a drone production facility that they say, hey, we want to make a change, then change it. We can either support you with our engineers, or if you're smart enough to do it yourself, then you do it. And our goal is not to vendor lock. The other piece I would add, just for clarification, because people might be scared about this, is that, Firestorm's going to create a monopoly with their drones and their production. That is not our intent. Our intent is to print whatever within reason we can. And I think that includes, even up to group threes. I won't tell you which company I was at on Monday, but I was in Huntsville, and I'm very interested in printing the systems they have and scaling those with them. And so we have big things on the horizon for 25 and 26. But we have to be really measured and discerning on opportunities, or we'll trip on our own feet as we go forward.
So that pairing of the operators in CONUS with the manufacturers downrange, as we're talking about putting stuff inside the first island chain or wherever it is, we can't forget that the stuff in the U.S. has to be going on as well. We are going to need to adapt. We are going to need to make these changes to the circuit board or the code for the thing that's flying or the physical design. You can't do that at the edge, because the folks who are needed to do that are engineer types who need to be ensconced in their happy Silicon Valley lives wherever they are, back in the US. You can make those trons of their product flow back without physically moving the thing. You couldn't do that in World War II. That's the difference between what we're at now, is you can take the idea and the innovation and literally email it, and then it comes to physical reality out where it's needed. The first time that I started seeing the need for that edge adaptivity, Camp Ramadi 2007, we're in an IED duel where the bomb makers in Anbar province were fighting with the tech development guys who are literally welding solutions to whatever innovation the bomb makers made that week. And if we'd had to wait for some General Dynamics contractor to show up with his rope belt and his, Sperry topsiders and his retired 05 pay, the kind that I'm talking about, man, it would have been 5 years before we got something changed. But instead, what we had was Lance Corporal Banats with his welder and Lieutenant so-and-so and Chief Warrant Officer so-and-so. They would make the solution that day and put it back into the fight. Oh. I'm seeing all these innovation cells, and that's good. We're getting in the right direction. The question is, how do we do this at scale? How do we federate that information out? Open architecture is the answer. I think we're getting short on time, but one of the questions you wanted to get into was the value of that. That's it. If we have vendor locked proprietary solutions, then we can't contribute in like a GitLab kind of environment to these solutions. Then one thing that's learned in one area doesn't proliferate around everybody else. We need to look at this as a crowdsourced thing with a partnership between the people on the ground, be they industry or active duty or partner nation. But everybody comes to the solution and then propagates it out.
Jeff, something you said, I don't want it to be kind of overlooked in this conversation, and it's really important. One is, there are innovations that happen in combat. It's just how it's the natural relationship with, there's a problem solution. And with smart people that are enabled, they will solve it, guaranteed. That's exactly what you're seeing in Ukraine. Ukraine's a guerrilla fight. They're figuring it out. They're finding solutions, right? It doesn't mean it's a one size fits all, solution to combat. But the other piece is like DJI was rolled out into the military through SOF because they said, hey man, we can use this tool. And they integrate it into their TTPs. And then we're like, oh, we have these vulnerabilities with DJI. And okay, so fix it or give us a tool that works the same. So the thing that I think is going to be really impactful in this whole conversation is exactly what Jeff just said. It's when you have capable folks, they're creative and have a hard problem, and they have the tools. Let's say it's a modular US, and you can do whatever you want with it. You're going to find a different TTP than I never thought of. Now, if you have the ability to produce and manufacture in the field, this is going to 10x innovation across the DoD. Not everyone's an innovator. Not everyone's creative, right? But there's pockets of them all through the military, and candidly, they get out after their first enlistment because they're so disenfranchised. And what we want to do is we want those smart people using these tools to change the way they fight. We'll support them. And I'm looking at this as linear for me, right? It's a drone. Okay, got it. It flies and does all these things. They're going to take this thing and they're going to create something that we've never thought of. As long as they are enabled to do that, and I think that we can provide a means to that end.
that's worth a whole separate episode. Like the human factor there. We've got the people. They're already in ranks. We have no ability to identify them. And because we have this binary, you're in the military or you're out of the military, and there's a pressure if you want to make an actual salary and have control over your life to get out. Mm-hmm. So we do lose our talent 100%. Like, I'm a great example. I tried to start what I'm doing with Splash One while on active duty. I got a bunch of strange looks like, how is that going to prepare you to make general officer? Like, dude, that's not what I'm here for. I'm here to win wars. And if I have to get out of the military to start a drone company to do that, roger that. I would love to be able to stay in a status where I can fluidly come in, come out, whatever's best to serve the nation that month, uniformed or not. The problem is that, again, we've got this World War II era mentality and this non-dual use. Maybe the dual use thing we should start with are humans. Maybe we should expand the concept of guard and reserve to allow more fluidity for people to come in and come out as they need to.
Dual use humans.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of this format, man. You guys just went on a straight heater for the last 30 minutes. Like, Rob and I could have turned our videos off and gone and made cocktails, and you guys would have just kept going. I mean, that's the beauty of it. And honestly, that's the plan, is to pair this, these folks together, folks that are, in the field or on the customer side, and folks that are, providing, that solution, because it's such a good back and forth to hear it from both perspective. And so
I just wish Jeff would stop using these big words that make me feel stupid. So that's
I know. I have to tell. I just nod and smile. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm Googling the whole time.
Call. Yeah. Good call. And those that aren't, tuning in the video, we got to call out Jeff's hat because it's so perfectly situated for today's conversation. Yeah. It says, make drones American again. So
this is from Corvus Systems. They're an American company, startup. They're building the rare earth enabled motors that I currently have to buy from China. They're building them in the US. It's a new startup. So shout out to those guys doing great work.
Sick. Yeah, we'll give them a plug as well when we promote this. But I just want to just kind of be mindful of everyone's time and just kind of wrap into this final segment. So we'll do a little quick rapid fire Q&A, some business, some really, really personal questions. I'm going to start. Let's start with you, Chad. You ready?
Sure.
All right, go ahead and just pitch Firestorm as if I was a 5-year-old.
Yeah, 3D printing drones. If you're a 5-year-old, I don't know. Well, here's what I would do. I would give you this little Lego set right here, which is our 3D printed drone. Yeah, and that'd probably do it for me.
That would do it.
Yeah, but now how we pitch Firestorm, we're a manufacturing company with a drone problem, right? And so we're scaling this to meet the demands of tomorrow, not yesterday. And so that's the easiest way to put it.
How do you describe the culture at Firestorm?
Man, we've got an awesome thing going. And I think people can sense that even outside our business. We have 3 founders in this company, myself, Ian, and Dan. We all get along great. I don't know if you see that all the time within a founding team. This is 3 years in. We still like each other. We're on a hiring blitz right now, hiring some excellent engineers. So we need about 40 more people. So if you're listening to this and you think that you could be a good fit, hit up the careers page. But our culture, man, is fast. If you walk into our building, it says our mantra on the floor, and that maxim is operator first. You have to put the operator first in things you're building and things we're doing. And if we remember that, we're doing this for the right reasons. And we've got a bunch of other maxims I won't bore you with, but that's the most important to me.
Yeah, I mean, kind of touched on it, but what kind of technologist thrives in your environment?
We're getting guys from big companies right now. They want to innovate, they want to change things and break things. They want to go fast, and they're not finding that those big primes. But they come with a ton of expertise. There's a lot to be learned from those big companies. They do a lot of things really well. They build excellent, 4th and 5th gen fighters. They build excellent weapons. And so let's not be, arrogant and say that we figured it out. We need that experience, and we need to apply it to the small business mindset. And so, we allow people to fail fast. The guys are constantly testing. I'm really proud of our tech team. Our business team is just as high hitting or high performing. Some of you guys know who, Brett Barbie is. He's my, sidekick in this adventure. And he's the hardest working guy in industry. And I'd put my reputation on that. So, I'm proud to be a part of this thing.
Solid. What kind of morning routine do you have? What's the first thing you do when you wake up?
Yeah, every morning we wake up really early. My wife and I sit down, drink coffee together. We read our Bibles. I read my daily devotion. I spend some time in quiet, and then we get our kids ready for school, and I get to take them to school now in the morning. Something I didn't get to do when I was in the military, and so being present as a dad, being present as a husband, is something that I'm really valuing right now, and trying to figure out work-life balance in between that. So, but those are my priorities in the morning.
Nice. Aside from your phone, what's one tech gadget that you can't live without?
I don't know. That's the only tech gadget I have, that and my computer. I guess laptop. I don't know. I'd say the AirPods, until they die.
AirPods.
Yeah.
What's a charity or corporate philanthropy that's near and dear to you?
Obviously our church, we're actively involved in it. I served there with it was a middle school ministry. Now it's a high school ministry. And so that's what really occupies my Sunday nights, and young men, as they develop into, leaders within, whether they go to college or they go into the workforce. I'm affecting, 40 to 50 young men right now. And that's really meaningful to me.
Oh. If you could time travel, what's the time frame that you would want to travel back to?
I wouldn't. Yeah, I'd pass and give it to somebody else. I'm looking forward, man. I'm being honest.
What was your last question? What was your dream job as a kid?
That's a good question, man. I was just talking to somebody last night. I'd love to have been able to fly AH-6s, man. I would have given everything up to fly AH-6s in Iraq back in the day. I think being a pilot would be the coolest job. So maybe I'll do it later.
All right, Jeff, let's get to you real quick. I want to dial in a little bit on this, recent transition into civilian world. So, what kind of military leadership skill would you say is most transferable to a founder of a small startup?
Oh man, if you're doing military leadership right, it's to rapidly orient yourself to the new situation you're in. I think that the habit of military leaders is to ask, what did the last guy do? And that's toxic. It builds a habit and a pattern that doesn't adapt to the real world. When you come into a new situation, you need to Men in Black, pen flash everything you think you know. Look at the thing tabula rasa and design something for the era, the people, and the mission you have right then and there. Don't assume that something that was there previously is the right answer. Build everything de novo. Everything's got to be from scratch, or it's probably baggage in the rearview mirror.
I love that Men in Black, pin camera, everything.
Dude, totally, man. I showed up at my first unit as a lieutenant, and there were publications in the lockers from 1968. And I'm like, guys, what are you doing?
What's been your biggest challenge in building a stealth mode startup?
Oh man, the uncertainty of knowing what's coming next for me professionally, like knowing when and how to be able to actually get out of the military, the restrictions that come. Like I'm still getting a paycheck. I'm still on active duty, like as I'm speaking right now, but I'm short final to retire. So navigating those legal challenges, those ethical challenges. I'm moving my family here in a couple of months. I don't know where we're moving, and I'm dealing with all that while trying to get the company off the ground. Me personally, being involved with the new administration, having been, talking about a position that required me to be in a suit in the government here, having to say yes or no and figure out all these opportunities. Man, if there is no conflict, there is no interest. And I've got so many ties to different parts of this industry that picking one thing, burning all the other options. John Doolin, founder of Modern Intelligence, he and I were having beers on my porch a couple months ago, and he said, dude, the way it is that you have all these versions of you, the future versions of you that are screaming to say, pick me, make me the one that you do. And every one of them represents your dream. To succeed. You have to take all 20 of those Jeffs, pick one of them, and take the other 19 to the backyard and put a bullet in their head and say, you're just not going to be real. And that one, I'm burning the boats so you can be the real one.
Jeff got the questions before this, didn't he? I'm just kidding.
Gonna say, yeah, man, these answers are brilliant. Let's keep it going. Is there a favorite piece of legacy technology that you still own today?
Legacy technology. Yeah. So a 1980s Apple IIe keyboard is like the mechanical clickety clack of that is just unbeatable. And I've got an adapter that makes it so I can USB plug that in. And when I'm doing deep work and I'm writing, just my hands flow and it feels good. And that's, it's all yellow and gross from being used for, 40 something years at this point.
That's such a hipster answer. You should be wearing a beanie right now, man.
That sound, though, it is nostalgic, isn't it? That old click.
There's nothing like it. Yeah.
Is there a charity or corporate philanthropy that's near and dear to you?
Kind of. So I'm really involved with my son's school, Drake, my 14-year-old, who goes to Hawaii Technology Academy, and I try to be involved with their drone club, their robotics club, help them out on all of their field trips. So that's the closest thing. I'm a big fan of mentoring, just like Chad was saying, that the next generation of folks, the people that made me who I am. That was a debt that I'm trying to pay back and pay forward to be part of the bigger thing. I'm a big believer in paying people for their work, but the kids can't pay you yet. So we got to pay them with our time and our energy.
Nice. If you could have dinner with any tech icon, past or present, who would it be with?
Oh, man. Easy Leonardo da Vinci. That guy had all of the vision and none of the technology to be able to actually do it. If you put him in 1980 and 2020, he is Elon Musk times 1,000. Mm-hmm. And he was just stuck in a pre-industrial era where he couldn't make any of his ideas come to life. I'd love to, instead of going back to his era, put him in a time machine, take Chad's ticket. And
that's a good point. They could have
bring him to the modern era.
And his patents. We could have made Tesla some money.
Right.
And bonus points for not settling for Elon Musk, which is like the number one answer every time.
No, Elon's great, but he's a product of our era, and he's done amazing things in our era. I'm curious on like a millennium perspective, who could else thrive with the opportunity we have, and that's worth noting, guys. We live in this era. We aren't in the era where we're peasants and hauling corn and wishing that we could do this. We have all the tools. We have this opportunity, and it's sick that we get to live in this timeline.
Mm. What's the worst fashion trend that you've ever followed?
Oh, God. So I'm lucky that I've been a combination of a nerd and a military guy to where fashion has been just never something I care about. I'll say that was it. In my early 20s, I loved the Marine Corps ethos of horrible haircuts being an indicator of a skilled warrior. And I didn't get it. I was a new guy. If you see pictures of me from that era, I'm sorry. I look like a complete idiot. And that's part of the reason I'm adverse to haircuts these days. I'm like, that's not a thing. Like, a good haircut and a good shave and a shine boots, it wasn't the indicator of a good Marine. That was a good Marine. And I believed that crap when I was a young guy, in my teens and early 20s. And I had the revelation, probably mid 20s, like, wait a minute, these guys are absolute idiots, but they just happen to look like good soldiers. There's no correlation here. And in fact, you can hide a lack of knowledge and competence behind the right guttural grunts and, a shiny uniform. And so now I'm very adverse to that. When I see somebody who puts a lot of pride in their appearance and military stuff, I'm like, what are you hiding?
Dude, that's awesome.
All right, last question, and then we'll wrap. What was your favorite dream job as a kid?
Dude, I think I'm living it. Like, I knew growing up that I wanted to be both a special operator and a computer tech guy, and I could never reconcile those two partitions of my brain. And here I am, like, I'm the special operator who got to do drone stuff in the Pacific, all the replicator stuff, the H word that you can Google and I can't say. Like, I got to be the driving force behind a lot of that in the Pacific while doing a lot of the special ops stuff behind it. So I think I'm pretty lucky. I got to do it.
Sick. Awesome. All right. It's good point to wrap on. Appreciate you guys joining us and, spitting some insights and paying it forward, giving back the knowledge to the next wave. Appreciate you joining the pod.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Thanks for having us on.
Thanks, guys.